Well, I've got a special treat for everybody listening today. We've got Jeff Sesol in the house. And as you know, we always start the podcast off with asking our guest, what does impact mean to you? Mm-hmm. And how do you show up in the world and create impact today?
So to me, impact is really making people realize and change the way that they look at the world, right? So my focus right now is leadership. And so what I'm trying to do is make an impact for people to say, look, anybody can be a leader if you just think about it in the right way.
Wow.
And so if we can get them to start removing the emotional side of things and think about it in a goal-oriented, logical, what do you want to get out of this way? The impact for that, for them alone and for them as the company that they work for is immeasurable. It explodes when people start thinking differently. And the goal is the impact for me is to try and get them to think differently about how they go about doing things.
How do you do that? How do you go in and kind of spend that time and really strategically push someone to make that almost transition or transformation or pivot?
Right. So I'm a firm believer in 2% change creates compound results.
2% right? Change. I like that. Right? Yeah.
So people hate change, right? And so what we like to do is go in and just start working on small little things. Like for our leadership coaching that we're doing, we have this whole program that we do, and each month we do a different topic, right? And so it's small things. And it's things they know. It's like, what is your why? How do you deal with empathy? How do you delegate? We've all heard of that before. But now what we're trying to do is teach them to leverage that. And so we're not just talking to them, We're actually getting them involved. We're doing role playing with them. We're putting them into a situation and say, how would you respond with things like that?
Real-time application.
Real-time application.
Yeah, right? I love it.
And so those small changes, that's why we do it. I mean, the whole program is like a 15-month program. But again, we're doing it in small little manageable chunks.
Yep.
Because again, we're getting people to change, right? I mean, think about it. Someone comes into your office and they start yelling at you. Your natural reaction is to kind of defend yourself, stature upright, and maybe almost emotionally get
charged back.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. Don't put me in a corner. I'm going to come out fighting, right?
Totally.
The goal is to kind of say, all right, what's happening? Why is this person like this? Figure out what's going on in their life.
Yep.
And the biggest thing that I always tell people is, if you're going to be a leader, and again, here's the cool part: leadership doesn't mean you manage people. You can be you and I peers, and I can be a leader to you, and you can be a leader to me during certain situations.
Totally.
And that's what we have to change.
It's right? Interchangeable though, right? Like that's such a key point that you just made is like, I can be a leader in this scenario and I can be following you in another scenario. Correct. And that's the beauty of it, right? Like the harmony and the compassion around leadership because it's interchangeable for a greater goal.
Right.
Yeah.
And I call that true leadership is what we're trying to get to. And the goal for that and the reason for that is that, like, when I grew up in the corporate world, to be a leader, I would start a Harris Bank in Chicago. You had to be an expert in whatever you wanted to be a leader in. Now, here's what happened. Once you become the expert, you were the know-it-all. So there wasn't really leadership. It was like, hey, this is the way I want you to do it.
Makes a lot of sense, yeah. I've been there. I've seen it. Yeah.
That's not leadership at all. That's, that's not democracy. It's a dictatorship.
Yep.
And so what we're trying to do is remove that. And there's a huge gap right now. It's funny. I mean, I can give you a ton of stats that are just blows my mind. 75% of the workforce is going to be millennials by next year. 69% of those millennials feel ill-prepared to be in leadership roles.
We need it more than ever.
It's a huge gap.
We need it more than ever.
And again, it goes on, but to be able to, and I'm going to go back to your word, impact. To be able to make an impact, we just have to start with small little increments. Because you said to me, how do you go about doing that? And that's one of the reasons is that everybody can get a book. There's a million books. I have a new book coming out, same thing, right? But unless you apply it in real time, you're going to be doing the same things over and over and over again, right?
Totally.
And so our goal is to start changing people in small little pieces and putting them into real world situations and hopefully create muscle memory. So when they do get into that situation, they stop, they pause, they go, wait a minute, it's not about me. Let me find out what's going on with them.
Put on that different lens.
Yep. Yeah, totally.
It's so two things that I want to harp on. One is the micro education, right? You're like, okay, we've got small groups and we're doing this little by little and we're going through this 15-month program, which I love. Do you see that being the most effective in all kind of the programs that you've built, some things that you've been involved in? Like, how did you land on that micro kind of content but extended over that 15 months. Like, I'm curious how you picked that strategy. And then my second question is, with that strategy, are you seeing people actually speed up by slowing down and learning in smaller segments?
Yeah, so the way I came across the strategy is probably a 2.5 year journey from when I started Pull the Chute. And, just working with people and realizing that although I want them to change quicker, they're not going to. It's going to be at their time, right? And so I think
we've all been there, Jeff.
Yeah, right? I know. And I don't know what I was thinking, because that's the way I work too. It took me forever to figure things out. So what I did was I wrote this book, and it's called The New Leadership Landscape, Redefining True Leadership. And I wrote it in a way that every chapter is actually part of the training.
Oh, cool.
We go through.
Nice.
Right? And so what we talk about is a particular topic, and then we talk about how to apply that in the real world and who has applied it. People like Elon Musk and Steve Jobs, and Sam Altman. These guys are all amazing leaders at some point.
Yeah.
Steve Jobs had his problems that we all know, but there were certain aspects of him that were amazing, right? Yeah. And so we take those little things, and that's it's funny. When I was growing up, my dad used to always want to have input into my life, especially when I got to be an entrepreneur. He's like, look, I can help you. And I said, okay, here's the one thing. I just need you to understand is I get to make the decisions, right? And I said, look, offer me all your advice. I'll take what I think I want, but do me a favor, don't get mad at me if I don't take all the things.
Of course.
And he agreed to that, and I got to tell you, it was an amazing relationship after that, right? And I think that's what we need to do with other leaders, right? We look at a Sam Altman, we look at a Steve Jobs, and we say, what was the one thing they did that was really great?
Yeah.
And we take that, right, and we start using that. So anyway, so the book does that, and then what it does is it walks you through and says, okay, here's some exercises that I'd like you to do to learn, right? And the goal for the book was to actually be the guide for the real world coaching and working in groups, because, again, we can read it, but until we learn to apply it, then it's never going to work.
I love the role play side of it. Like, when you were talking about that earlier and the application, right? And I think that's where the biggest opportunity is for leadership is how do you create situations and scenarios in practice and play prior to getting to real time. And like you were talking about, changing that behavior and that initial response and tying down that emotion. And I think it all starts with those micro understandings of the base and the philosophy behind it, right? Because at the end of the day, if you are going to be in an emotional state ever, it usually falls back, in my experience, on your belief system.
That's right.
Right? So if your belief system is there's conflict here, and naturally fight or flight, you go into fight and it's rah, 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 and you bark back, that's not necessarily good for anybody, right?
That's
but
right.
if you go into, let me recognize this emotion, well, what's my belief around it?
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
And my belief is based on this education and leadership training with Jeff and Pull the Chute is, let me pause, breathe, and go X, Y, and Z based on your framework, right? So it's like, it's so important to understand the content base. And I think so many times we try to fast forward and, what's this catchphrase I can use? I was talking to someone the other day and we were talking about questions, and it's like, we don't want to just give you a set of questions to use because you're not going to know when to use them.
That's right.
Right? So from a human connection standpoint, it's like you don't ask the person, the deepest question if you are in a cocktail setting and 10 people around and you don't know them, right? You lead up to that. And it's so interesting around leadership because that change is so important, but that change doesn't happen without the education on the belief system and the base.
That's right. And I don't think, another interesting stat, 38% of everyone that moves into leadership fails after 18 months if they have no training.
What was it? What percentage?
38%.
38?
You put people in a leadership role,
wow.
You give them nothing, after 18 months they're all going to fail.
Wow.
Again, you might say, well, it's only 38%. No, it's 38% is what I say.
Well, the other thing, too, is you may not necessarily fail, but you could be in burnout.
That's another big thing.
And then the next 18 months is your personal life is fucked.
Yeah, totally.
I think we I've been there personally where it's like, hey, we're pushing. this isn't set up well, the systems aren't there, I'm not getting the education and leadership.
That's right.
Trying to make it happen, we're still hitting numbers exceeding, but everything's burning down on a time clock.
Absolutely.
And as you know, as a leader, as a executive, as an entrepreneur, owner, founder, co-founder, whatever the title is, longevity, effectiveness, and efficiency is important, not quick bursts of revenue and profit.
Right.
Right?
Absolutely. And
So how do you keep that thing going straight and gradually up?
Well, here's what a lot of people forget is that if you can bring your people in with you, right? So this whole leadership thing allows them to have a voice. Is one of the things that it does, right? And so a lot of times what happens is leaders are like, I need to have all the answers. And when I say leader, like owner of the company or the CEO or, everyone's looking at them, they have to have all the answers. The most successful executives and co-owners are the ones that say, I don't have all the answers. Let's all talk about this. And you guys give me some input. Now, I get to make the final decision, but there's going to be so many things that I didn't even think about that you guys are going to bring up, right? And if we can get
goosebump moment, by the way. Usually every podcast I get one of these. We got here in a few minutes.
Yeah, but I mean, if we can get those guys to just take that time to say, look, I don't have all the answers, but together we're going to figure it out. Huge. Again,
I think it's so important because you're leading the conversation. You're not necessarily leading the conclusion.
Correct.
Right? And when you lead the conversation, it can be input. Have you thought of that? Does anybody you can be the host of that collectively.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so important because, and then also too, I think is when you're wrong or when you make a mistake or someone has a better idea or someone has a great approach to the argument and they're actually right, right? Because we've all been in those settings where we're like, we have certain information and that makes sense, but that person has information that we haven't acquired, and like falling on the sword in those moments, right? Like you didn't bring the most up-to-date information. You didn't have a conversation with this player who's important in this decision, and being able to just openly do that, I think, is so important. And you were talking earlier about like some of these high-level leaders, and I've read like Jeff Bezos speaks last in all his meetings. So that way he can acquire the information rather than lead with the information that doesn't allow people to think individually.
That's right.
Groupthink almost, right? Because you're the leader and you're so elite in the business world. I mean, let's be realistic. It's Amazon. You're so elite with this culture and your brand around you that maybe those people wouldn't speak up because you may have had somewhat slightly opposing. That to me is leadership, and similar to what you were saying with your book, like pulling those little nuggets. I thought of that. I'm like, that right there gives the opportunity to share opinion without dictatorship, back to what you were saying earlier.
Well, and how many times when we were, for me, especially in this corporate world, people would ask your opinion, and I'm like, I'm not giving my opinion because I'm not going to look like the idiot, right? They're just
it's bold to give your opinion.
Right, but if we build this culture that says, I want your opinion, then that changes everything. So Sam Altman, we all, maybe not everybody listening knows, but, he got fired from OpenAI back in November, right? And that was from a disagreement with his board about where OpenAI should go. He got fired on a Thursday. Of course, Microsoft hired him on Friday.
Yeah.
By Monday, there was an open letter signed by, like 470 of the, and I'm getting that number wrong, but it's somewhere in there, of the, let's say, the 500 employees that said, if you don't bring him back, and if you as a board don't resign, we're all walking out.
Wow.
By Tuesday, he had a job back, right?
Yep.
But why did that happen? Well, Sam Altman built this culture of people. He wanted people to come up with ideas and work together and be open and offer ideas and be able to know that they have a voice and that they're going to be heard and that sometimes it'll work and sometimes it won't. But he built that whole culture like that, and these guys thrived. That's why OpenAI is what it is today, right? Yeah. And that's an important factor. But building that culture where people can have a voice and feel comfortable having a voice is just huge.
Have you ever been in a setting where you didn't have a voice through your career?
Actually, early on when I was at Harris Bank, so here was my story at Harris Bank. Basically, you came in, it was in the 80s, and you came to work, you filled out a timesheet that said, and I started at 7:45 every morning. If I walked in at 7:46, for some odd reason, because I took a train downtown and so it was always on time, but something happened, I had to circle it in red. Right? Now I could leave at 4:15 or I could stay until 4:16 or 4:20 and not get it circled in green because I was the good guy, right?
Yeah.
So it's basically do your job, keep your head down, go home, get a paycheck. And that was all they wanted. And if you said you had a voice, it wasn't there, right? The cool part is that my mentor, a woman by the name of Wendy Bailey, I worked in the trust fee department. My immediate boss was as brutal as they could come. She would openly yell at me if I made a mistake in front of everyone. It was a room of 12 people. She would openly yell at me, get red. And, I was about ready to walk out. My dad goes, kill her with kindness.
Yep.
And so I started doing that. Hey, Karen, I'm really sorry. Unfortunately, her name was Karen. She fit that moniker of what Karens are. But she, I'd say, hey, Karen, I'm really sorry. I'm doing my best. I'll get better. Wendy started to see this, and she moved me to a new boss and actually had Karen taken out of the department because she saw that she was not bad. So when I got that opportunity, I felt suddenly like my new boss actually was asking me questions, and I had a voice. And I was an early tech guy. I taught myself how to program. And so what I started to say was, look, I think I can automate what we do by hand.
Yep.
And they listened. And my boss, Wendy, at first took me part-time and let me do programming. And then when I proved that I could make it work, she literally created a job for me full-time. And her and I together then, because she was the visionary and I was the integrator, together we automated the entire trust fee department. She became one of the youngest VPs in the bank as a woman in the 80s, which was unheard of. And I became one of the youngest operations officers without a college degree. Because I went 2 years, bored out of my mind, said, I can do this much faster. I'm a self-taught guy.
Just teach yourself programming, no big deal,
But that's how my brain works, right? It does that. So that was kind of cool. But she was always my mentor because she allowed me to have that voice.
Yeah.
She allowed me to say, I think we can do this. And she'd come to me and say, hey, I would love for the program to do that. And I'd go, ooh, I can do that. Right? And so I took that through my entrepreneurship. And when I started Free Drive, my business partner was Mike Rhodes. He was the CEO. I was the CTO. Mike would literally give me drawings on napkins and say, can we do that? And I'd go, I think I can make that work.
Yeah.
Right?
That's so cool.
But that's kind of how that all worked. So once I got my voice, the sky was the limit for me, right? But in the beginning, I had no voice, and it was very difficult. It was very constraining.
Do you think if that opportunity didn't present itself, which you created that opportunity, right? Mm-hmm. So that you would have been at the bank for much longer? Or do you think that you would have left? Or do you think that you would have gave 10% or 20%, silently quit? That's been a term we've heard a lot in the last few years.
Yeah, well, it's funny. At the bank, because of when I first started, I didn't know how long I was going to last because I came from a sales, job. So I used to talk and they didn't want all that, right? So that was that was one of the hard things. Once I got past that and I got the different boss, they all thought I was going to be a lifer there because I had automated the entire trust fee department. Why would I go anywhere else, right? But I knew there was so much more that I wanted to do. So I don't know that I would have ever stayed at the bank. It was just too constraining.
Yeah.
And that's just not who I am as a personality. But it was unleashed.
But that's the beauty in it, right? Is the opportunity presented itself through someone who noticed what you were doing, saw potential, saw opportunity, saw negative treatment. Mm-hmm. That person was a good leader to step in,
absolutely,
build human connection with you, revitalize almost what you saw in the culture of the company, mm-hmm. put you in a position that you aligned with, you could build, create, do what you loved, talk more. Right. In turn, what happened to that woman in a leadership role? She grew. She became the youngest woman VP in the 80s, right? So that story, as I'm following it through and listening to you in the details, it's just reminds me of that simplistic life value of treat someone well and you'll get taken care of later almost, and I think if you do it for the right reasons, that woman didn't know she was going to be the youngest VP. No. And that woman may have had even limiting beliefs based on society at that point with women in those executive high level roles. And the reality is we know in the 80s there was that glass ceiling.
Oh.
I think that's where that term coined,
That's
right?
right,
In the late 70s or 80s. And in turn, she got all that other opportunity, you know, and it's just such a beautiful thing. And I think sometimes we miss as leaders, yes, we want to build and do what's right for other people, but there is something that will come back when you create so much of that opportunity for others.
Absolutely. You know,
She never would have been able to do the coding.
No, not at all. Yeah, it would have
But because she saw you and had communication and built a relationship and there was connection and understood you and what made you feel important and what you wanted to do, now you're in that role. You succeed, she succeeds. It's a win-win.
Totally.
It's win-win.
I one of my favorite stories from her where I learned how to do that, okay? I carried that over to Free Drive. And we used to always show appreciation for our guys and girls. And we were probably at about 18 people at this point. Free Drive is web-based storage. I always tell people one of my small little claim to fame is I'm one of the founding fathers of web-based storage because in 1998 we had created the ability to upload a file from your web browser and get to it from any other web browser on the internet.
Yeah.
So
That's
kinda
it.
cool, right?
Yeah, really cool.
great-
Let's not downplay that here by any means. Like,
Well, it was a cool time. It was
yeah,
really
super cool.
So we had several million people worldwide using this thing, and we always every quarter we would take our team out and show them how much we appreciated them. One time I took them to a Cubs game. Usually we were on the second floor of this building, and the bottom floor was a place called Jack's Tap restaurant bar, and we'd rent the back room out, free hors d'oeuvres and drinks for 3 hours. But we always thanked them. And the one time we're doing this, and I said, "How many of you have worked a 40-hour work day for us?" And this girl goes, "You mean week, right?" And I go, "No, day." And she goes, "I don't understand what that means." And I said, "That's when people like Josh and Bunty, who are our database guys, came in on Monday, and I forced them to go home on Wednesday." Now, here's the backstory. These were database guys that we were doing things that didn't exist. We were creating stuff just to handle volumes and, and inventing different ways to do things. And the guys on a Monday, every time I worked the morning shift from 6 to 4, Mike worked the afternoon shift 12 to 10, so we had a lot of coverage. And we let the database or the programmer guys come in whenever they wanted.
Yeah.
Just do your job. Because some of them were morning people, some were overnight people. And so every time I left, I say to Josh and Bunty, "Now do me a favor, guys. Please go home and get some rest," because we were pushing. And they're like, yeah, we'll do it. And the next morning I woke up, and we had this room, it was a conference room of overstuffed couches, chairs, video games, movies, stocked fridge, all that stuff, right? There's a note on the door, "Wake us at 9." I'm like, "Oh, you guys are killing me, right?" And I go, "I thought you were going home." "Yeah, but we were talking last night. We came up with this great idea that we think will help." And they wanted to get it done.
Yeah.
And then before they knew it, was 2 in the morning. And they're like, "Let's just go to bed here." And so they did. So the next day, same scenario. I said, "Make sure you go home." "Yeah, we will." I came in Wednesday, and there was a note on the door. "We didn't get it finished. We thought we got it done though now. We're really excited about it." And so I walked up to Josh about noon, and I said, "You need to go home." He's like, "Why?" And I go, "He's like a 6'5" guy. He's about 285 pounds." And I go, "Dude, you need a shower. I just got to tell you." Now, the reason I tell that story is I encouraged them to go home. But because we gave them this environment to be what they wanted, to create what they needed to do, they didn't want to go home.
Yeah.
I encouraged them, "Please go home." But to me, that was this great culture of, we trust you guys. Give us your thoughts. Give us your ideas. Tell us what you think will work. And
You're
they just-
part of something.
Yeah.
You're part of the creation.
That's a great point. You're part of it.
You're integrated. And the reality of it is how many times, and I mean, I can count 10 years, 11 years, 12 years straight I did this, where work became family. Work because I wanted to build, I wanted to create, I wanted to grow. Right. So how do you create an atmosphere, like from a company standpoint? I never got that. We created it based on, relationships, human connection, based on the relationships we built on the team. Like, the atmosphere wasn't great. The atmosphere was actually terrible. And it's funny because I can only imagine where the growth would have been, the opportunity for the company, if they just helped out with the atmosphere, right? Like you're saying, we created this atmosphere that felt like home and comfortable, and these guys and gals were having these great conversations, and they're spending so much time together that they felt like best friends or family and didn't need to go elsewhere, right? You guys poured into it. I can only imagine that in some of the teams and opportunities that I've been in, where we created it because we were dying. Like, and it was, hey, this sucks and this is miserable. But like, you know, and I remember specifically, like, I just moved to Nashville. I don't know anybody, and I don't want to go back to Boston. Like, I'm going to make this happen. We got to make this happen.
Yeah.
And then it was like commiserate over misery, but also let's get through it. And then you create this bond, this connection, this internal culture within, but you get excited. And it's like, I can only imagine in an atmosphere where you don't have to build that yourself, and you don't have to use your personal funds or use your personal relationships or personal leverage, because the company sees it, supports it, and is in alignment with it, so you can produce, be effective, be efficient, increase revenues, but do it in a way where you're happy, or not even happy, but excited. Right? Because business sometimes isn't happy, right? You can work on a project and it can never get to come to fruition, right? But at least you're excited all the way up to that point, you know?
When you love to wake up in the morning and go, okay, what do I got going today for work? I'm excited about it. Because we all have to work. I mean, unless you're, independently wealthy, we all have to work, right? Versus waking up and going, shit, I got to go to work today.
Yep.
Yeah. That's the goal. That's one of my visions and passions, is to have more businesses and more people that work for businesses be excited about going into the office.
It's funny you say that, because today I woke up and I said something similar. I'm like, today is a great day. I get to hang out with 3 really cool people and do what I love.
Yeah.
Talking about leadership, talking about people, talking about relationships, culture. And I've got 3 meetings. You're the first one today of this. And it's like that level of just being present and being happy and excited changes the trajectory of the day.
Totally.
Like, I just knocked over a full coffee during a podcast and it didn't even rattle me, because we're having such a great conversation, right? Like, imagine if I didn't want to do this.
Exactly.
Imagine how much rattled I'd be, or, oh, let's stop the podcast, or let's reschedule, or, like, and I can count so many times that I was that, working for a job or in a career, or, funny story, and I've said this before, but funny story about spilling a drink. Like, I went on this big podcast, top 25 in Vegas, flew out there, did all these things, dropped a bottle of water, it exploded in the waiting room, and there's a puddle of water everywhere. John Gordon's walking out, Bradley, right? And I'm just like laughing. But it was because I had that level of presence of like, I'm doing stuff I love to do. I don't have to do this. So like, when I make a mistake, or when something goes sideways, or something stupid as knocking a drink over, that used to rattle me.
Yeah.
That used to knock me off the path. And like, now just being present by doing what I want to do has allowed me to, I don't feel that emotion anymore.
I know. I wish we could get more owners, executives to realize the power of that.
Yeah.
That's my crusade right now. If we can get them to realize the power of that and just give their people the training to be better leaders that they need. There was an article I just read the other day. France did a whole study on leadership and the power of bringing leadership into the companies, right? Wow. And they brought it down to something as simple as this. For every euro they spent, they got 4 in return. That's 400% return.
Wow.
Right? And I was like, that is so powerful. I mean, again, so small, but so powerful.
Yeah.
And I think that we have to get our leaders, meaning the owners or the executives, to realize the power of that. It's, again, I'm sorry for stats, but I got so many of them.
I like stats. My analytical brain's like, still remembering that 38%, by the way, millennials.
83% of companies realize they need to have leadership training for their people. Only 5% are doing it.
Yep.
And those are all, when these stats I'm giving you are like Gallup and Forbes, and these are reputable,
that are actually studying it over time, and aren't just fluffing it to skew left or right.
No, I mean, these are solid stats, and it's just, when I see stats like that, it just blows my mind. I'm like, do you guys not see this? What
do you think the problem is, though? Do you think it's money? Do you think it's investment? Do you think, what is causing the CEO, in your opinion, today to not make a decision to invest in some type of leadership training? And then my second question is going to be, is that something where they don't believe in the digitalization of that, or they don't believe in someone coming in and doing outside training? Like, what do you see kind of at that level around this leadership concept when it comes to investing in the business for some type of program, whether it's digital or in person.
Right. So I think there's a couple answers to the first question, which is the first for me anyway, is that they're not aware of the impact that it would be if they did do it. They're
So education, they just don't understand,
the blinders going, right?
Do X, Y, and Z and get this. Okay.
Yeah, and I think that comes from the fact that of like they're pushing everyone so hard that it's like that if I do that, it's going to take time away from us.
Yeah.
Like, I talked to a company recently, and she said, okay, because I was talking about doing weekly training, and she goes, that means I lose 4 people an hour, and she equated 4 hours to what she would charge the clients, and I'm like, whoa, do you realize what you just did? That it's not about the money at that point. It's about making your business run smoother and better.
Yeah.
And the return on that is going to be 4 times what you think it's costing you.
Yeah.
Right? And so, I had to...
Well, also, too, is, the turnover, performance, lost accounts, right? I mean, we can go down the path of, like, all the things that could happen with someone leaving a role based on unsatisfaction, not being satisfied.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, it's ongoing. So I think that they just have the blinders on. And then the second thing is we got to get them to realize what implementing some kind of leadership training would impact, how much it would impact the company. And then again, the reason I've broken everything out into like 15 months is to do it smaller. We meet twice a month. And then we have availability for half-hour sessions if they want them, or real-time coaching if they want it. You're in a situation, text me, Jeff, you got 5 minutes. Yep, let's talk through what's going on. Because to me, that's the most powerful.
100%.
When it's real time, you call me and you say, okay, here's what's going on. How do we want to go about this?
Because we build the beliefs, or you build the beliefs, but still, if it's something not almost identical, we may not be able to frame it back to the belief. Right. So we need to reach out to you to say, well, this is going on. I'm still kind of in a tizzy, right? I'm still kind of, I can't see clear, this happened. And as we know, in those high stress moments, decision-making sometimes fails. So when you need it most, you need the resource. Yeah. And I hear so many programs, and it's just like, we have to be there in real time, or have a resource, or have a strategy to go into it with as much leverage, as much knowledge, as much resource as possible, because this is real.
Yep.
And these business decisions affect people, they affect families, they affect, what goes on the table at dinner that week, right? Like, it gets deep. It does.
It does. And it almost gets scary to me at times. I mean, it's the story of the guy that comes home from work and he had a really crappy day at work, and he as he walks in, he takes all that burden and he hangs it on a bush outside. And he doesn't even take it into the house so that he can enjoy his family. Yeah. And he did that physically as a way to remind him not to bring all that stuff into the house.
Why does life have to be like that?
Exactly. That's the question, right? Why does it have to be like that? And again, it's life. I get it's not.
Man, that's heavy. I got the visual right now, and I'm thinking like in some times in my life, where it's like, wow, that was so heavy. Mm-hmm. I never took it off, right? I just went through life for years in the corporate world and just beating myself up. Really,
beat yourself up, and then your relationships.
Everything was falling apart. Everything, everything I touched. Yeah. Good opportunity here, good partnership here, business deal here, investment here, it was all crumbling because it just the energy, the no one was in a good place. Yeah. Because I was doing stuff with people I worked with too, from an investment side and strategy and new companies, and everybody was going through it, I
mean, life is not all roses, right? There's going to be some tough times, but you can get through those tough times, which is, again, something that we work on, the resilience of being able to go through these tough times as a team and get through them in a satisfactory way.
Together.
What I always tell people is, look, you might have a particular goal and you might only hit 60 or 70% of your goal, but it's way better that you came out at 70% and everyone was still in this wonderful place versus hitting a 20% of your goal, and everyone's feeling like crap.
Miserable. Wants to take 2 weeks off.
Yeah, it's great if we can hit 100% of what we want to hit, but that's not reality. We all need to know that. But just to be on that positive upswing and just kind of be that positive influence for people. Yeah. Again, that's a leadership thing, right? And again, you and I, you're having a bad day. I'm walking up going, what's going on?
Yeah. Well, even just the recognition of something's off.
Yeah.
Right? Because you can go, hey, Tommy, hey, Karen, hey, Bill, hey, whatever, and not know the person well enough to realize that something's off. And in those moments when no one realizes it and you as the leader do, is where that bond starts to grow immensely.
Yep.
And I think that's where now that relationship's built to have trust, care, compassion. And once those emotions are aligned, when there's problems as an employee in a company and you feel those things, why would you want to go anywhere else?
That's
right. And like one of the questions, I was talking to a client recently and I was like, you have problems in business and you have problems in life, right? And he goes, yeah, of course. It's like, duh, right?
Yeah.
Like, I'm like, okay, stay with me for a second. I know this is simple. It's supposed to be simple. Well, when you have problems in life, who do you turn to? Well, my wife and my family and, you know, my dad for advice, right? You're talking about your dad and things. I say, okay, great. Well, when you have problems in business, who do you turn to? Not my boss, not the CEO, not the VP, none of that, right? Okay, well, why? Well, it's business isn't family. That's not, I didn't say it was family.
Right.
I made the correlation between when in your personal life, who do you go to? You go to family.
Right.
Not saying business needs to be family, but who do you go to? Well, there needs to be someone in the business side.
That's right.
And that's at any role. New supervisor needs to go to the middle-level manager, right? That middle-level manager needs to go to a VP or an area or regional, right? And then that VP needs to go up to the CEO, COO. And it's everybody has to have that relationship when there is a problem so you can solve it together in a cohesive unit with synergy.
That's right.
And more effectiveness and efficiency. And it's just so crazy to me that that simple question, it was like, okay, yeah. Yes, you know, and in times like, and this is what I'm seeing a lot, and I'm seeing this more so now than I ever have in the consulting coaching world, is like people aren't getting it from their company. And their company doesn't want to bring someone in from the outside, right? So I'm all for, as a consultant, I'm all for like solve your problems internally, right? Like I don't want your money if I can't make an impact or help you. Like solve it internally. But if you don't have a role or you don't have time, which is 99.9% of what actually happens, right? Someone meets with me, oh, I think we can move this person. Great, you should do that, blah, blah, blah. Here, I can write a plan. They call back, right? Like, we actually need them for this. But in those moments, like what I've realized is, well, if that employee or that leader isn't getting it from the company doesn't want to bring someone in, they're going to go get it from outside. And when they get it and when they learn the skill and when they acquire that knowledge, they're going to go and they're going to take that new knowledge and they're not going to ask for a raise. They're going to go leverage it and go work for a competitor.
That's right.
And I just had this happen with two massive companies that are head to head. A friend of mine got promoted, got into a new role. Everything's great. He's like, you know, I'm trying to figure this out. This is kind of a mess. I need help with this. He's on a performance improvement plan 2 weeks after being promoted. How does that, like, just take that out of context, right? Yeah. I haven't given you the idea, but like, just in context, tell me that's the employee's problem.
Talk about popping the balloon, right? He deflated everything there, man.
But like, how are you putting him on a you just promoted him.
Right.
So if you over promoted him, which could be the case, I don't know the details.
How do they know that in 2 weeks, right?
How do you know that in 2 weeks? Or if you over promoted him, fall on the sword.
Yeah.
Have the conversation. Keep his pay the same. Work on, give him more work or a different bonus structure. Like, you promoted him. You made the wrong decision. Right. And he left, and he just got a gig for $25,000 more with their competitor. And his outside counsel was me as a friend, just having conversation, getting him, hey, think about this, do this, treat it this way. And it worked out beautifully. Yeah. Beautifully. But it never had to be like that. And he wanted to stay. He didn't want to leave. He didn't want to go through the transition of a new company and do the onboarding. Like, the money wasn't even the factor. And then I asked him, well, how much money did you get in your raise? It was like $82 more. and they leveraged the title.
Oh, wow.
So what he did was he took the title and leveraged it to the new company and got 25K more on the right scale, and he's crushing it.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. It's all about the support thing. You know, it's funny when we had, and it's still happening, but we had the great resignation here recently. They were talking about it, right?
Yep.
You know, 4 million people a month were changing jobs.
Yep.
And the funny part is, you mentioned it wasn't about the money, which is what triggered this for me. 79% of the people were leaving because they felt unappreciated. Only 12% left for more money.
That's a huge percentage based on the numbers that you're talking about here. Like, we're not talking about a couple hundred people.
No.
We're talking about hundreds and hundreds of thousands.
We're talking 4 million people a month, right? I mean, think about that. They felt unappreciated. So they're not asking for more money. They're just asking to have a voice. They're asking to be appreciated. They're asking for the leadership to, you know, show empathy for them and to help them get better. And that's what I keep trying to look. If you will help your employees be better, they're going to pay back 10 times. They just want to know that you care about them.
I mean, the amount of time you spend away from your loved ones to work on someone else's goal and to help be a part of that and to potentially impact or change the world, for what? To be treated like shit?
Yep.
To be talked to like, I you know, in my younger days, I remember being like, so many times, like, in my head, never out loud, but like, if this guy talked to me like this and we were on Boylston Street in Boston, like, he'd get smacked, right? And this is young Jim and crazy Jim, and, you know, I'm talking 15 years ago, but like, I remember being like, why is it okay to talk to me this way? But if we were walking down the street and you were disrespecting my mom that way, like, this wouldn't fly. Like, and if I say anything to you and like, hey, why are you treating me like this? You pour on even more. Yeah. And it just, we don't need to operate business that way.
Nope.
Doesn't need to happen.
Yeah, no.
All right, so I asked you about a bad leadership experience. Let's land this plane on a good leadership experience. So in your mind, if you were painting a picture or you were creating a good experience for leadership, talk me through kind of what comes to mind, or a situation or a scenario in your brain, Jeff.
I mean, to me, good leadership is the ability for people to realize that they, first of all, they have a voice. Know that as the leader, you're going to stand shoulder to shoulder with them.
Yeah.
To know that when things go wrong, you'll take the blame, and when things go right, you give the praise.
Yeah.
Because true leadership, as you've said several times, falling on the sword, right? You know, I've been with too many people where leadership, when something went wrong, leadership literally threw that person under the bus to a client. Oh, they should have never done that. To me, that means that you as the leader haven't taught them right. So it's your fault.
Yeah.
You need to take the fault. And what I've always said too is, look, as a leader, you say, look, sorry this happened. Here's what we've done to fix it so it doesn't happen again.
Yep.
And, you know, we want to offer apology, and maybe we can give you this, you know, to say we're sorry. What you've done, though, is you've created a relationship now with the client, right? We all know something's going to go wrong periodically, but if you have the relationship that we've talked in depth, then they're going to be less apt to say, I'm out of here. And retention of clients is really important.
I've had some of those bad situations refer business based on how we handled it.
You got it.
And owned it, took responsibility, followed up, communicated.
Yeah.
Like, how can I help you? Yep. You know, this took time out of your day to talk to me about a problem we caused.
Yeah.
So thanks for giving me the 20 minutes, but what can I do for you now?
Right.
Because you gave me 20 minutes you should have never had to give me.
Right. Yeah.
And then that's a referral. Let me introduce you to this person and a friend now.
Yeah. But I mean, you know, I want an environment where all my people are excited about working for us. They come in with new ideas. They know that they can voice those ideas. I mean, you know, I got guys working for me now. And I said to them, look, you know, we're going to throw out ideas. I do not want you to ever be afraid to throw out ideas. I said, and some of them I may take, just like I said with my dad. Some of them I may take,
Yep.
some of them I may not. I don't want you to be upset if I don't take all your ideas. You know, ultimately that's my role, is to make that decision. But I'm going to do it based on, you know, my experience and things that we're talking about. Now, if you think that we're going to hit the wall at 120 miles an hour, you better be jumping up and down and getting my attention and telling me why you think we're going to hit the wall at 120 miles an hour. Because maybe I'm missing something.
True.
Right? But other than that, you know, that's the environment I want to build. And then the other thing too is just let them know you appreciate them and offer them, you know, what I like to do is say to people, hey, Jim, what do you need to do your job better? right? And then as long as it's within reason, I'll give it to you.
Yeah. What tools can I provide, or
Right.
what do we
And
need to change, or
Yeah. Is when that happens, you now own whatever you do, because I gave you what you needed to do your job better.
Yeah.
And again, as an executive, I can't dictate how to do your job. The only thing I can expect is a certain result. But if you have a better way to do it and the result's the same, and that's what we need to deliver to the client, I'm all for it.
Yeah.
Let's do it, right? But you get so many times where the owner or the executive is like, no, it's got to be this way, and they're OCD about the way that you have to do it. And I work with them and I kind of go, tell me why that's so important. What step would not allow that end result to be what you want it to be, right? And if they take the time to open themselves up and walk through what the other person's doing. They'll go, oh, yeah, that does work. But they got the blinders on all the time. So my environment, it really is this great culture where we're growing the people because I believe that people are going to grow the company. And so we're giving them what they need to do their jobs, to feel excited about coming into the office or working from home as we do anymore, and just to feel good every day about what they've contributed to the business.
To the business, to the growth.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think that's
part of it.
And here's the funny part. It's not hard to do. It's not hard. But everyone makes it hard.
It takes time. It takes intentionality and time and energy, right? Just like anything you do. But it doesn't take this absorbent amount of time. It just takes time to create the base, the belief, the behavior, and recognize it. And just make those tweaks. Like you said, 2%
2%
better.
change,
yeah. So
that's great.
Man, what a great conversation.
Well, we could probably do this all afternoon.
I was going to say, yeah. Well, thanks for being here. Yeah. And it's so great to just align with someone who looks at this so similar, right? Like, Jeff, you get it. You understand how to deliver it. You are delivering it. You are creating impact. You are creating change in the world, and you're passionate about it. And I think that's where the difference is in any business you touch, is like, how do we get everybody to be a passionate leader? So thanks, man. Thanks for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate you.
So fun.